Hello, welcome to Loremaster's Library, the show where we look at many of the topics and themes of tabletop gaming and look towards their origins. We are going another month straight, starting today with a favorite, aliens. Tabletop has a variety of extraterrestrial life to round out their universes, but today we'll be looking at the aliens from our world. What they are, how did their legends come about, and potentially, how can you use these themes to add spice to your games? We are ready to go, so beam me up. First, to start off, let me tell you what will be on today's list. First, we have four main ones: greens, greys, reptoids, and Nords. We'll be exploring both the story of these creatures, as well as what they mean psychologically. That's right. This is a video examining the shadows of human psyche. Be afraid. Then after those four, we will look at some aliens who only appeared once, not enough to get a theme off them except that they were unusual creatures, but who have influenced alien discussion and might inspire something at your own tables. And finally, no cryptids today. Some have crossovers with aliens, but I covered cryptids during the summer. Think of this as a part 2 of this video with the intention of expanding into an area which were not quite cryptids. But the proper start is to look at factor 0, the reason there is so much interest in aliens, which eventually grew to what it is. Once upon a time, people just assumed there was life on other planets, one way or another. I mean, why would there not be, right? There are people on the other side of seas and mountains, so why would the sky be too far away? The realization that we were the only ones in our solar system was a shocking discovery, and one that was only made within the last 2 centuries. We're not talking about some backwoods middle-aged thought like flat earthers, but something that was only revealed false around the time of the steam engine, and a bandage that hurt badly to rip off for many. So of course, the idea of people from beyond the stars would start to form, with humans insisting as strongly about them existing as they once were about vampires and giants. First off today, we have the little green men, aliens which are short, have green skin, and antennae coming out of their heads. The idea of these aliens was not populated by close encounters, but by fiction. Washington Irving of Headless Horseman fame, in his satire A History of New York, said creatures he referred to as lunatics from the moon had green skin. Edgar Rice Burroughs would make the Martians from his John Carter Marx series green, which is where we get the basic outline of the Martians that eventually flourished. Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon both punched out greens, and Orson Welles' famous War of the Worlds talked of little green men. It was the 50s, post-Roswell and the ascent of the UFO sightings, that green men became the talk of the town before the more recent greys took the spotlight, mostly leaving greens to the realm of fiction. As if any of what we are talking about today is real, but I digress. But the term little green men came from much earlier than any of these, first used to describe fairies, which makes the connection obvious. With the advent of science, the idea that fairies existed was slowly disproven. But the idea we were alone was too much for humanity. And so the ideas connected to fairies and mythology slowly transitioned to science fiction and aliens. While the others we will talk about today bloom from the fears and hopes of humanity when they consider life outside our own, greens represent the continuation of the ancient fears humans have had of others hidden upon the earth, just translated into the stars. Next is the favorite of the pseudoscience community, Greys. Stories of these beings appeared in the 50s, based on hearsay evidence of the happenings at Roswell. Since then, stories of short men with gray skin, huge heads, and spindly limbs have started appearing across mostly the nation, so we'll stick to the nation, across the nation. Most often, they'll appear in stories of someone waking up mysteriously on an operating table, unable to move, and the creatures standing above them. The creatures would then proceed to do seemingly random experiments on them before sending them back, sometimes leaving scars of unknown origin, and other times healing incurable diseases. Which, if you look over the Greys, one question presents itself. Why? Anyone with a sense of scientific knowledge knows that just doing the same procedure over and over is not going to tell you anything. If it was training students to do the procedure, that would be one thing, but the descriptions that we get of the probing seem random. Which makes sense, because the Greys are not scientific creatures, but instead born from the fear of science. Look at people who talk of abductions and you find they tend to be, what's the most polite way to put this, lower on the education scale. Most of them do not know or have not had as much experience with what surgeries actually look like, which gives rise in their heads of ideas closer to mutilation. The large head and emaciated body gives the ultimate look of what extreme intelligence looks like to a large swath of humanity, as well as the human assumption that large minds lead to small hearts, when small hearts are unfortunately common across the board. Unfortunately today, there is much misconception about science, which to many people is an unknown and therefore scary. Two examples that I want to are extremely relevant at the current time are that people thinking that vaccines can do a whole host of unscientific things and are best avoided. The one addition I heard recently being vaccines turn you into lizard people. A common alien trope, but not how DNA works. And people looking at gender transition and talking about it as mutilation, showing how little they understand the difference between mutilation and surgery. There is a prevalent fear of science across our nation, and Greys are the imagined product of that fear. Third on our list is Reptoids. Reptoids are about the size of humans, but lizard people. They have the ability to disguise themselves as anyone with the shapeshifting, and therefore could be anyone. The idea is speculated to have originated from serpentine humanoids in Conan the Barbarian, and from tales of Atlantis and Lemura from occultists. Occultists would also go on to release pamphlets in the 30s about humanoids with serpent heads, again, most likely inspired by their depictions in Conan the Barbarian, and in turn would go on to inspire conspiracy theorist David Icke to do his whole nonsense. Either way, eventually starting in the 1999, the idea many ancient and powerful families were actually lizard people began propagating, and it began being used as insults thrown around politically. But outside of insults, 4% of our nation actually believes it. Another easily showing on why this alien is one of the most popular: fear of others. Specifically, the facet that a person is not what they appear as. There are plenty of two-faced people out there, but this idea takes it a step further, to the level where there is some large conspiracy. This also goes on to channel a person's pride in some cases, believing that someone they are close to is replaced partially because of their own importance, or that they are some heroes who are the only ones who see that this person is actually some monster, and they are the chosen who will stop them from harming the world. It also goes back to slander, which has been part of politics since 90% of politics is actually slander, so. But anyway, this powerful person is false, and the only way to stop them from stealing power which is not truly theirs is to rally behind another point, usually one which in reality is equally as bad. All in all, this alien comes from people who wish to see the worst in other people for one reason or another, and would rather have a lizard face instead of one of soft meat as the enemy. For our fourth pick, we have Nords. Nordic aliens are about 2 meters high, have pale skin, blonde hair and blue eyes. Most tales have them come from somewhere in the Pleiades star system, and among aliens they tend to be more on the side of benevolence and beauty. In most times they appear, they tend to be seen as the good aliens, whose purpose are to turn humanity away from some destructive path they are on, or inspire them with some astounding advancement which would improve human life. They are associated with concepts like spiritual growth, environmentalism, peace, and love. I do not really need to describe these ones, I just need to tell you they're also sometimes called aliens to give you a full picture on where these creatures come from. You notice how all 6 we have talked about today are humanoids, except with some slight physical differences. This is because humans have difficulty thinking outside their pre-established boxes. Nerds are the most human-like, with a description that can be interpreted as some strange alien, or just a really tall human. When describing good and more peaceful alien species, humans tend to describe them as if they were human plus, them believing the essence of humanity is goodness, and the only way something can be better than humans is to be close enough to humans to be familiar enough to concede the point. I don't even want to get into the white, blonde hair, blue-eyed nonsense more than to say that dark hair and tan skin, hello, come at me. Oh, and of course, picking physical features to be superior to others is stupid and small-minded by definition, but again, I digress. The essence of nerds are simply human pride, or more precisely the unwillingness to accept we might not be as superior as we have told ourselves these past 5,000 years. Now that we've got the main 4 out of the way and my thoughts on humanity out of the way, now let's look at some of the famed individual encounters, starting with the Hopkinsville Goblin. On August 21st, 1955, 5 adults and 7 children from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, arrived at a local police station to report the farmstead was under attack by silvery, short creatures with pointed ears. The police found nothing when they searched, and the family was gone by next morning, leaving one final claim the creatures had returned before they skipped town. Officially classified as a hoax by the FBI, it does not stop these small goblin creatures from becoming one of the go-to appearances of aliens. And the last one I have on my list today is the Flatwood Monster. I think I may have covered this one also in this video, but has enough effect on alien culture to be in this one anyway. Didn't go back to check, so I might not have. Either way, date is September 12th, 1952. Place is a small town by Flatwood, West Virginia. 3 young boys see a streak of light across the night sky. Got one of their mothers, 2 more children, and a National Guardsman to accompany them to check it out. They, for a second, see a tall creature with a red face, and they smell some odor, which altogether is not much to go on, especially evidence-wise. But the tall, pointy-featured, red-eyed description of what they thought they saw has been used in various alien designs, so they are, of course, worth mentioning. And that brings us to the end of today's video. No UFOs this episode. I'm talking about aliens, not vehicles. And skyfish are close enough to UFOs. And they're based on Loi videos instead of sketchy assertions, so not much to go to for the psychological. While there was likely some life somewhere out there in the universe, I can tell you for certain that these guys likely are not anything outside of human imagination. And I hope going through all this helps you find inspiration for your own tabletop adventures in the land of imagination. Either way, that's all for this week. Come by again next week when we review a friend from back in Monster Month. See y'all then.